I've come across this quite a bit over my career, where companies have multiple systems that are siloed within the organization. And one of the questions that keeps coming up is, which system is the truth? What is the single source of the truth? And it's hard for companies to come up with that solution, because on the payroll system, they'll have a head count of so many employees. On the HR system, they have a different head count of employees. And on the finance system, maybe the cost that is reflected in the finance system from an employee perspective is completely different, because each system is stationed in its own department, maybe on its own server, and there's a dependency to convey information from one department to the other through some form of manual intervention, whether it be from a payroll perspective, where the person gets a report from the payroll system and manually captures that information or journals within the finance system, or it could be that the HR system does the onboarding and then passes information through to the payroll system. But the HR system does need employment equity reports, which requires payroll information, and they'll ask for certain information from payroll and manually capture that into the HR system. And through all of these manual interventions, inevitably, the data becomes far less accurate. And the whole goal is to see how we can integrate these solutions best we can. And if they have the capabilities to be able to do so. If they don't, companies need to rethink their strategy from a systems perspective and invest in systems that can actually speak to one another. It may happen that a solution is fantastic at payroll, fantastic at HR as well, but it doesn't do the finance component. But what we can look at is, how can these solutions that we invest in, can they integrate seamlessly amongst each other? And most systems these days, and the ones that I work with, absolutely can, so that there is a seamless transfer of data. And the risk of having incorrect information then becomes a thing of the past. So the question I always ask companies as well is, do you have a single source of your truth? A single source of truth. And many companies can't really say that. And with having these kind of systems that can seamlessly integrate into each other, inevitably, you can have a single source of truth, because with fantastic dashboarding that is available in the market, having those dashboards being able to integrate into other applications as well, you can have information in one dashboard to give you the payroll cost, your finance costs into one solution itself. So let's take example, there are companies that do project-based work. The project costs potentially sits within the finance application, all right? But a big part of the project cost is related to the cost of having an employee assigned to that particular project. So is the information that is employee related truly reflected within the finance system of that particular project? And in many cases, it is not, because those two systems are not speaking to one another. And inevitably, what happens is that our profitability on a particular project is maybe calculated incorrectly because of the fact that these two systems do not speak to one another. And inevitably, when it comes to how we invoice our customer, it generally is based on what the cost to us is on a project. And if that is incorrect, how could we have an accurate forecast from a profitability perspective if our costs are incorrect? So it is important to have that in place, to have that kind of automation, that integration within between the two applications itself. Also, when it comes to automation, and that is one thing that I believe every company should be investing in, is how we automate certain functions that are currently manual. Having a look internally, what it is that is currently manual and how can we improve upon it. So again, when it comes to employee self-service, When I apply for leave, what happens is my manager needs to approve. So in the olden days, we would have a form that we'd fill in. I give it to my manager. I'd hope that my manager approves it, who needs to sign it, and then pass that on to the HR department. I assume that this is done. I then go on leave. But the manager maybe did not pass this on to the HR department, and the records have not been updated. So inevitably what happens is I go on leave and my leave record has not been reduced. Come, a few months down the line, I get a better job offer with somebody else. And upon leaving the company, I need to be paid out for the leave that I've accumulated. And many companies end up having to pay for leave that people have already taken. But because it never went into the HR system, inevitably the leave balance that I'm paying out is inflated. And companies ends up losing thousands, some hundreds of thousands, because they're not managing leave correctly. So with the employee self-service, all of this is automated. And when a manager needs to approve leave, he can do so electronically. There's no paperwork that is required. If the manager takes too long to approve leave, there are escalations within those kinds of applications that allows it to go to somebody else in the workflow that can approve the leave as well. So it doesn't stagnate with a particular person. And those are the kind of automations you can bring into your organization to reduce the risk of having leave incorrectly reflected within your payroll and HR system. And a big thing is companies need to move away from doing things manually. The more manual interventions we have, the more risk there is for error. And the more risk there is for error, there could be potential risk, especially from a payroll perspective, with regard to compliance. And with compliance, revenue services in most countries do not mess around. They focus on how that you're paying on time, and if you're not paying on time, that there will be penalties. If the calculations are incorrect, there'll be penalties as well as interest that accumulate to companies. So it's vitally important that we try to automate these things so that from a risk perspective, we can mitigate that.